A careers advisor once wrote 4 words on a piece of paper and handed them to a 16-year-old boy. You. Science. Never happening. The boy kept that note in his wallet for 15 years. Not to torture himself. To remind himself. Fast forward 15 years. He's standing on a stage, about to receive the country's biggest innovation award. And the person walking toward him with the trophy, in a black usher's jacket, is that same advisor. He doesn't recognize the boy at all. This is the story of Daniel Okafor. From Manchester? And the day being wrong finally paid off. Chapter 1: The Note. Daniel was 16. Sitting across a desk from a man named Mr. Pearson, who had exactly 11 minutes to decide the shape of Daniel's future. Daniel had said one sentence: I want to study physics. Maybe work in research. Mr. Pearson didn't even look up properly. He glanced at Daniel's mock exam results, sighed the way adults sigh when they've already decided something, and said, let's be realistic. Science isn't really for boys like you. Have you thought about something more practical? Then he wrote it down. 4 words. On a yellow sticky note. Meant kindly. He probably told himself. A helpful nudge toward something smaller. Daniel took the note. He didn't argue. He just folded it in half and put it in his wallet, where it stayed for the next 15 years. Chapter 2: A Doubt. Doubt doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in small doses, repeated often enough that you start mistaking it for truth. For a while, Daniel believed the note. He nearly dropped physics that same term. He told his mother, quietly, over dinner, that maybe university wasn't really for people like them. His mother put her fork down and said one thing back. Since when does one man in one office get to decide who you are? Daniel didn't have an answer, but he kept the note anyway. Not as proof that Mr. Pearson was right, but as something to argue with. Silently. Every time he opened his wallet, he went back to his physics homework that night. He didn't feel confident. He just felt stubborn. Chapter 3: Determination. Determination, for Daniel, didn't look dramatic. It looked like extra lessons on Saturday mornings. It looked like a battered second-hand textbook, held together with tape, that he read on the bus so many times. The spine finally gave up completely. His grades were good, but not remarkable. Not the kind that make headlines. What made the difference was that he simply refused to stop. He got into a decent university, not a famous one. He studied materials science because it let him build things with his hands as well as his mind, which felt more honest than theory alone. Every time something went wrong, a failed module, a rejected internship, a professor who doubted his ideas out loud, in front of the whole class, Daniel touched his wallet, felt the folded note inside it, and kept going anyway. Chapter 4: The Long Middle. Nobody tells you that most of a career happens in a room nobody's watching. Daniel spent 6 years in a small lab attached to a manufacturing company, working on a material that could make solar panels cheaper to produce. Most days were failure. Small, unglamorous failure. A compound that cracked under heat. A formula that worked in theory and collapsed in practice. His colleagues moved on to flashier projects. His manager, twice, suggested he focus on something more achievable. Daniel almost heard Mr. Pearson's voice in that sentence. He didn't say anything. He just went back to the lab bench. The next morning. That's the part nobody puts in the highlight reel. The years of being almost right and choosing to stay anyway. Chapter 5: The Breakthrough. The breakthrough happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the way most breakthroughs actually do. Daniel adjusted one variable he'd tested a dozen times before, just slightly differently this time. And the material held. Properly held. Under heat. Under stress. In a way nothing on the market currently could. It took another 18 months to turn that one afternoon into something patentable. But that Tuesday was the hinge point. The moment the door that had stayed shut for 15 years finally clicked open. His small company partnered with a larger manufacturer. The material started appearing in solar installations across 3 countries. Within 2 years, Daniel didn't call anyone that day to celebrate. He went home, opened his wallet, looked at the note one more time, and put it back exactly where it had always been. Chapter 6: The Ceremony. The National Innovation Awards were held in London, in a hotel ballroom, with more chandeliers than Daniel had ever seen. In one building, he was one of 5 finalists for Breakthrough of the Year. He hadn't expected to win. He'd written a short, honest speech, mostly thanking his mother, just in case. When they called his name, the room applauded properly, the way rooms do, for people they've decided to believe in. Daniel walked toward the stage, feeling strangely calm. The calm of someone who has spent so long proving something to himself that the audience's opinion barely registers anymore. He didn't think about Mr. Pearson at all. Walking up those steps, that would come a few seconds later. Chapter 7, Vindication. An usher stepped forward to hand Daniel the trophy. Tall, formal, in a black jacket, a size too big for him. Daniel glanced up to thank him and stopped. It was Mr. Pearson. Older, grayer, clearly working events now, rather than careers advice. Holding out the trophy with the same polite, empty smile he probably gave every winner that evening. There was no recognition in his eyes at all. None. Just a man doing his job, handing an award to a stranger. Daniel had imagined this exact moment more times than he'd ever admit. Imagined saying something sharp, something that would finally make Mr. Pearson feel the way that yellow note had once made him feel. Standing there, holding the trophy, he felt something else completely. Not anger. Something closer to pity. For a man who'd once had the power to shrink a 16-year-old's future, and clearly still had no idea what that power had cost, or what it hadn't managed to destroy. Chapter 8, The Wallet. Daniel said, "Thank you very much. Nothing more." And Mr. Pearson nodded and stepped back into the shadows at the side of the stage, already reaching for the next trophy on the table. He never once looked properly at Daniel's face. He had no idea. Later that night, in his hotel room, Daniel took the old yellow note out of his wallet. 15 years old. Softened at the folds. The ink slightly faded. You. Science. Never happening. He didn't feel the need to burn it, or frame it, or send it back to Mr. Pearson with a triumphant letter. The real victory, he realized, had never been about proving that man wrong. It was about the fact that he'd stopped needing that man's permission at all. Somewhere back on a bus, reading a taped-together textbook, A very long time ago. He put the note back in his wallet one last time and turned off the light.